Hickok 45 here. Welcome to the Hickok 45 Talks channel. That's where you are. Someone asked me, and I've gotten a lot of suggestions. I think it was in a Sunday video where I mentioned how I was running out of topics or I wasn't sure what I wanted to talk about. And oh man, must have been 20 suggestions, and some of them were pretty good, I thought. It really was a help. You've probably already seen some of them. I don't know. But someone wrote, okay, for those who are not initiated into the world of school teacherism, would it be neat if a fellow were to share some insight into the politics of the school, high school, whatever faculty room? Bet you there's some stories there that folks wouldn't see coming, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know, maybe they've seen too much Welcome Back, Kotter or something, if you remember that old TV show. Or there were some other shows, I guess, about teachers, which I never really watched, or schools or that kind of thing. But anyway, I thought, well, I'll talk a little bit about that, maybe, not a lot. Probably more boring than you would expect. Teachers are just like anybody else, for the most part. You've got, as you know from being in school, you have a wide range. You have some pretty inept teachers. You have some pretty good teachers and maybe some great ones. I would say that's one thing. Well, it's probably the same in almost every profession. There are people who go into teaching, though, really a wide range of people. There are some who just should never have done it. Yeah, you've seen them. You've had them as teachers, unfortunately, right? That cannot handle a classroom. They were able to get through school, and get all the required courses and everything, but they just have no common sense, could not handle discipline at all, and it showed every day, right? You probably have somebody in mind right now, because almost all of you have been through school. And it's just an incredible variety, right? Well, from the inside, I had 29 years teaching. Now, my experience, as I mentioned before, I was in various private schools, 2 different private schools during both of my teaching stint. It wasn't by choice. I wasn't even aware of private schools, really. I grew up in northern Kentucky. I don't know of any private schools other than parochial schools. I went to a public school, Boone County High School, and others. But one of the job offers I had was from a private school in Franklin, Battleground Academy, and in 1973, that summer. And and I don't know what's that. And I went down and interviewed. It was a really neat school. It had been a boarding school. It had been around since 1889 and all that. So it's a really historical place, very interesting. And so I took that job, And when I came back to teaching, it was another private school I was familiar with. I just checked around several schools and there was an opening, like 10 or 12 years later after I'd been in other endeavors. But anyway, both of my teaching stints were in private schools, but it doesn't matter. People are people, kids are kids, teachers are teachers, same thing. Many of them had taught in public schools and private schools and back and forth and different things. So I don't know, what insight do I have? I would have to confirm that there are a lot of, or there are a certain number of, like I said, teachers who shouldn't be in the profession. And then, of course, in the faculty room, you get to know them better. And there's always one or two that are just clueless. You think about wherever you work, around the office or the job site, whatever it is, there's going to be somebody, maybe more than one, that just kind of clueless about things, sort of with the program, but not really. And then occasionally somebody's not with the program at all and just makes it harder on everybody else. And I don't know. I always took my work pretty seriously. Whatever I was doing, I always did it. Tried to enjoy it and have a sense of humor and be a little crazy at times, but I always took it seriously and had stuff done on time and overthought things, if anything, and maybe a little too paranoid at times. I didn't trust copy machine. I didn't trust any of that's the machinery of having things ready, for class and things like that. But one thing that does come to mind, we had a teacher who was kind of new, I guess, new to us. She wasn't right out of school, I don't think, for a place. I won't mention any names, of course, but at one of the private schools, one of the schools where I taught. And whenever it was exam time, serious business, semester exams, final exams, and it's just serious business. That exam accounted for like 20% or whatever of the semester grade. And they'd all come back to school and get in certain rooms by class or by class level or whatever, and take that exam. So you better have it ready. They're all coming in tomorrow morning or next Wednesday for the English exam or the lit exam or the science exam, whatever. They're all going to be there for 2 hours to take that exam. Then they're going home, and then grades are due in 2 days or whatever it might be. And it's important for the students and the teachers. Better be ready. It counts a lot, and we generally have to get them approved at the head of the department, and which was not a big deal, but just then run them off and have them ready. And if they need to be stapled and every page need to be correct, if you've got like 8 pages or whatever the exam or 10. It better be in the proper order, and you better have instructions well written, and the whole 9 yards. Because this is the reason I talk about this. It's one area where it was revealed if you had a real dork you were teaching with, or someone who just hadn't thought it through, and getting ready. Well, I always try to have my exam ready, like at least a week before it was due or time to run them off. And just common sense, okay? Because you got a copy machine, has a tendency to break down at times, and you've got a lot of pages to run on. Maybe you have 70 students and you got 10 pages or 12 pages or something of this thing, and you got to get them run off and collated, and of course later better copier machines that would collate it and even staple it and everything. But so you need to have it ready well in advance, and everybody's trying to get to the copy machine. All this is going on. You've got maybe 15, 20 teachers. They have the same project. They've got to get that done too. So I would always be ahead of time, I tell you, because I knew Murphy was always watching. And then before you run it off, you got to make sure it's right. Think about how many times, this is another thing you can relate to. You've been taking an exam in high school, middle school, college, or somewhere, and you get down to question 4, and I don't understand those instructions, or it says to mark this or do this, but I don't see. You mean on this page, or is it on the back, or I'm not sure I understand what you mean by the last part of that question. Well, it's, how if you've ever been involved in anything like that, how easy it is to write something. You understand the question, but you need for all 70 of those students to understand it, whatever the grade level is, right? And to know where to put those answers. Do I round the back? Do I round just the front? There's a million questions, especially a nervous student, and they're going to be, would want to ask, But see, you got to have your act together. And what I would do is always I think most people did, when I got it ready, I thought, okay, I'm good. I'm ready to run this thing off. My answer sheets, I got my answer sheets made out the way I want them, and how I can use those to grade them, because the grading has to take place pretty quickly. And so I would make sure I was ready with that test, that exam, and then I would take it. I'd take whatever, some planning period or at home that night, I would take the exam. I would remove part of my brain and pretend I'm a middle schooler, and I would take it trying to think all the way through that. Okay, is that clear? Is that a clear question? Or they got that? Do I have the wrong? Do I have two answers, two questions the same repeated? Do I have, in a multiple choice? Do I not have a possible answer there, or do I have it twice? There's all kinds of things you can mess up if you're not careful. And did I cut and paste something and I didn't get a piece of it in there? Whatever it might be. So I would take it myself. And be very judgmental as I'm doing it. And okay, if there's something too hard, it's not a fair question, whatever. And then if I was happy with that, okay, there should not be any questions there. They should get that, and the whole thing. Then I would run it off, make copies of it, days in advance. Again, Murphy's waiting for the copy machine not to be working on that day or to break down. And everybody's in a rush, and then too, I might, who knows, I get sick or something, the day of the exam. So I'd have them ready in a closet, and I would tell our secretary, who was been there longer than I had even, I'd say, okay, Betty, they're in the closet, got them by grade level and labeled, if I don't make it, someone else can hand them out, because those kids all come in to take that exam. There's no rescheduling that day, So, a lot to that. Anyway, there was a teacher one year, and I kid you not, it was the English day for exams, and I mean, I was down in the lounge getting a cup of coffee. I mean, if you're not ready, things aren't ready to hand out. Man, what's wrong? You're in big trouble. The day, it was like 30 minutes before the exams were to begin. And she was in there at the copy machine running off pages, trying to get that exam run off. And I tell you, I mean, it's we've told that story, and because that's the stuff that jokes are made of. I used to joke about that. I'd come in like even the night before, the afternoon before, and joke about, I guess I need to run off my exam. And then sometimes I make the joke that morning of exams. See, this is English day, and okay, I need to get my exam run off, don't I? Oh yeah, that was a kind of funny common joke we'd make occasionally, because most people had them ready. You had to. Well, not this one. It was funny. It was funny. But anyway, you'd run into people like that. So anyway, administrators were helping her. We were trying to help her and staple them and get them, the kids were in the room ready to take them and getting paper to them at the last second. And it was bizarre. And then the other thing that would show up if someone hadn't been through this before was the instructions. And of course, we would proctor for each other. When our exam wasn't being given for the math or whatever it is. And it was just often a comedy of errors if the teacher wasn't really, really experienced. Even if they were, they sometimes didn't think it through. And you've been in these cases. You've got all 70 of your students, and maybe they're even in different rooms. They're taking that exam all at the same time. It's just, just the safest way to do it, right? And, well, maybe question 7. And question 18 and question 87, or there's something wrong with them. They can't read them, or they don't make any sense. You copy and paste it, and they just don't make sense. There's no blank on the answer sheet for them, or whatever it is like that. Well, guess what? Everybody's in these rooms being extremely quiet. They've got exactly 1 minute, hour and a half to take these. You can't even breathe or even look in another direction. Okay, you just can raise your hand if you have a question, and maybe the teacher's in there, maybe they're not. Maybe it's just a proctor in there, and they don't really know. So the test needs to be self-explanatory, really. Well, and you're running around maybe between classes or those classrooms and answering questions if there's a question. But that's just 4 or 5 questions I mentioned that have a problem. That they're not going to understand it because you just didn't look at it closely enough, and that's not very self-explanatory. They're going to have questions about that. All 70 of them, maybe in different rooms, are going to raise their hand and say, Mr. Smith, I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me? At different times, because they get to that question at different times. And so it can become a chaotic mess very, very easily. So it really separates the prepared people from the unprepared. folks, and the inexperience from the experience. And what would you just have to do finally? Okay, I got through this question, I've screwed it up, I didn't get the, and it's happened to me, but I mean, after the first time, I mean, I was determined it wouldn't happen, and I would warn them, look, everything is self-explanatory. Don't raise your hand unless you're having trouble breathing or you're bleeding, okay? I would just go through that. It's that if there is something that makes absolutely no sense, raise your hand. But if you have a question here, I would try to get it to that point, and I did 95% of the time, to where there is no reason to raise your hand and ask a question, because there's nothing wrong with the test, and you just didn't study, and you don't remember that piece of literature or whatever it is. That's the reason you have a question about that, because I would just make it a challenge to write that question correctly and thoroughly, and that was part of the test, understanding the question. I made that a mission. I really did, because I had seen all these fiascos. It just doesn't work any other way very well. And the kids are trying to take a test, and meanwhile everybody's got their hand up, and 14 people are asking questions, the same question. The teacher's having to interrupt the class, the test taking. Okay, everybody, listen up a second. On question 14, I forgot to add this, or it's not very clear, and it's a real fiasco. So anyway, that separated like I said, the men from the boys. I don't know, that was probably not very interesting to you, but it was. It's one of the things that comes back to mind when I think about goofy teachers and things that are just funny, and that the people have trouble with. But you always had dorky teachers on board for a little while. A lot of people came through the education system, and I did leave myself after 6 years, and I came back, and I was there for 23 years. I enjoyed it. I really liked teaching. But you would have people, they weren't sure what they were going to do in life. They were going to actually want to go to law school, but they wanted to teach for a year or two, they thought, or they just needed a job for a year or two, and then they were going to go to law school or do something different. And sometimes those were they were the I don't know, they were the ones who were the most inept at teaching or handling kids, because they just weren't really into it. It was just kind of an experience to have for a while. And it's not easy, from being a student or maybe a teacher too. It is not easy. You need to take it very, very seriously. It's a lot of work. It doesn't pay all that great. It doesn't matter. You got to take it very, very seriously to do a good job. There's no way around it. So there's always a dork, moving through for a year or two. And it may not, they didn't necessarily mean to just move on through. They thought they were going to make that a career and that they would enjoy that. But they discovered, and you probably saw some of those teachers, that I don't know, this isn't for me. I can't handle these kids. They give me a hard time, and what I discovered pretty early on, and I was advised of that too. You need to be more strict than you really want to be, because kids are kids. They'll eat you alive, and you're outnumbered. And so you do have to bluff them, and you can do it. You can do it. You can be nice to them. You can have fun, and still be strict. But it's a fine line. I think I achieved that after a couple of years pretty well, and I was able to enjoy it. Be strict, but really have fun with them and joke with them and tell jokes and then get back on topic. And that's the way I wanted to do it. Now, in some ways, it makes it harder. You probably have had teachers where they were afraid to crack a smile, and you just they were just like robots. You didn't really enjoy the class. They just didn't even seem human. They were just focused on the material, nothing else. They couldn't talk about anything off topic. They didn't dare get off the subject, and they might have been pretty good teachers of that subject material, for that matter. But I didn't. It wouldn't have been fun for me. I wanted to have fun and enjoy the kids, and still be strict enough that we're on task. And so anyway, I went all over the place on that one, didn't I? So, but anyway, if I think of something more useful to talk about my teaching career, maybe I'll share it. So anyway, life is good.